Hello, and welcome to the Let's Talk Transformation podcasts. Today's episode is about AI, future of work, and growth. And I am delighted to welcome Lomit Patel, Chief Growth Officer of Tinker and author of Lean AI. Lomit, welcome to the show.
Excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Susie.
It's a pleasure. I'm excited to have you on the show. Lomit, you're currently the Chief Growth Officer of Tinker, which is one of the pioneers in coding and edtech learning for schools. In fact, it has a platform, I think, used by over 60 million kids in 150 countries, is what I read. I think that's pretty impressive numbers. Really important around skills for the future and the future of work, which we'll come back to. You're also the author of Lean AI. So for those of you watching, I'm holding up Lomit's book, Lean AI, which looks at practical advice for using AI and automation for growth, but also with leaner teams. So really, it's more than a playbook for me. It's also about the future of the codependency of human and tech and how we go about managing that and also leveraging that. So let's start with Lean AI, which is a big subject in itself. In fact, it's two subjects in one. But can you tell us more about, first of all, Lean and AI together, and what inspired you to write that book?
Yeah, well, I wrote Lean AI primarily because it was based on a lot of the experience and challenges that I was having at my last startup, which was called IMVU, which was a social gaming app. And one of the big challenges, especially with any growing startup, is how do you get more done with less, right? So it's all about being resourceful and trying to get your budgets to stretch as far as possible. And so starting with that premise, one of the things that I wanted to really figure out was that we had a lot of great data on our customers at IMVU, and a lot of startups now have so much data. But the data by itself doesn't really do much unless you can really turn it into actionable insights as quickly as possible. And so the lean part really comes from trying to execute running all these sophisticated marketing campaigns, which primarily focus on how do you acquire customers, how do you retain, engage, and monetize customers. So it's all. So my role has always been around growing businesses. So it's all around how do you get customers, and then how do you keep them and figure out how to make money. And based on that, the AI part really came from, we had all of this great data, and I was trying to hire a lot of people to really help me run these different campaigns, and it was so challenging, as you know.
I can imagine.
Hiring is a challenge in itself. And so what I envisioned, and this was back in like 2016, I'm talking about, where there weren't a lot of companies that were really doing this, which was all around automation. Like, how much of these tasks and processes could you really automate? And the best way to automate is to really have the ability to leverage AI. And so the way I define AI is, how do you get a machine to think and act like a human, pretty much? Because and at that time, I realized we had a lot of this great data, and the question was, how could we use certain types of AI to really turn this data into actionable insights to help us to really figure out who are the right customers we need to target, what are the right messages we need to target these customers with, what is the right personalized experiences we need to create in our product when we bring these new users in, so that they can get engaged as quickly as possible. And once we get them engaged, what's the right way to really take them through this user journey, which is the ideal user path, to really get them to really see the greatest value in the product as quickly as possible. And that really comes from really personalizing the product to each individual. And that's really hard to do when you manually try to sort of create these experiences. And so by automating these experiences, we're really letting the AI to really talk to these different platforms that we integrated that had some shape of AI built into it. And so the magic really happened from really getting all of our data and integrating it into one place. And from there, having that data be populated into these different platforms that had AI built into it, so that they were able to create this asynchronous experience across the entire journey for these new customers that were coming in. And when we did that, that's when we realized that we were able to get so much more efficient at acquiring customers. So the cost of acquiring a customer went down over 3x, which was pretty amazing at that time when it was really competitive. We were able to out compete a lot of our bigger competitors in spaces like Google and Facebook and all these other digital channels, primarily because we were making real-time data-driven decisions, and they were still trying to do things by using a lot of humans to really execute those campaigns. And what resulted from doing all of this was that we were able to indirectly increase the lifetime value of our customers, which meant that we were able to keep a customer to stick around a lot longer. And as a result of that, they were spending more money on our product, which directly gave us the ability to get even more aggressive on our marketing. And so we ended up creating this virtuous cycle, which in business is really, for startups, one of the biggest challenges in any business is you don't want to run out of money.
Yeah, clearly. All customers. It's the same thing.
So the best way not to run out of money is to figure out how you can create this virtuous cycle of being able to grow your business with new users, new revenue streams, so that you can continue to keep controlling your own growth without needing to go and raise more money. And that's what we were able to do, because once we sort of created this whole engine around growth that was built on AI, and the lean part was that I was able to do all of this by really leveraging a lot of different marketing technology platforms. And I can go into more detail about that, instead of hiring more people, so that once, it took a bit of time to get it implemented, but once we had it implemented, then we were able to scale and grow so much faster without needing to hire more people. And what resulted in that was that we were able to, as an example, we were spending probably about $50,000 to $60,000 a month in a marketing budget, and we started spending over like $2 to $3 million a month, and we were getting even more efficiency out of that spend. And so we really saw astronomical growth. And when I joined IMBU prior to doing all of this, we were, for the most part, nobody really knew us on mobile. We were kind of, known as a gaming app on web, but web was kind of a dying platform for us. And in the space of a couple of years, we've been consistently and we ended up growing to becoming the second top grossing social networking app, which is pretty huge when you're competing with companies like Facebook as being a social network, or TikTok. And so we're the only, and ultimately, being an underdog to do that, the only way we're really able to achieve that, outside of having a great product, was really having a great growth marketing engine built on AI.
Which sounds incredibly simple when you explain it to me like that, but I'm sure it's quite a complex process, although the methodology is seemingly simple when you talk me through it. So what were your main learnings from that very aggressive growth curve? What made it successful?
I would say a couple of things, but the first thing is really, with any transformation that you try to do in any company, it all starts with people. At the end of the day, you need to get you need to try and need to build alliances internally first. You need to get people to really get behind seeing a vision of where you want to try to make the transformation. And so for me, a big part of that was to really sort of talk to a lot of the different stakeholders that were going to be part of the process, because none of this is really done in a vacuum. At the end of the day, you need to work with data engineering to really be able to create this place where you can unify all of your data sources. And so a lot of our data sources were kept in different places, in different servers. And so the first thing we had to do was to move a lot of our data into the cloud being, where we created this customer data platform. So it's really easy to access that data. So to do that, it was really about getting the head of engineering, the head of product to really get behind that vision. But it all starts with kind of the CEO and the C-level executives. So really getting them to really see the value in doing this now versus deploying resources into some other project. And I think the biggest learning there was just over communicate and keep sharing best practices and case studies on what other companies were potentially doing that were ahead of the curve. And for us, at that time, and these are companies that most people have probably heard of today, but it was companies like Netflix that were really leveraging, and there are companies like Amazon that were really doing this, and companies like Uber and Lyft, but the point being, there wasn't any gaming company that was really doing this at that time, and us being in the gaming space, I wanted us to sort of be the leader in the space to really take that to take that leap of faith, and so that was one thing, building internal alliances. The second part of that was really doing a real audit internally. Like, do we have the resources to really build this into what we want to build? And one of the challenges with doing any transformation is just being honest with yourself to really figure out what resources that you really do have and what resources you really need to kind of get to where you want to go. And what we found out was that for the most part, when I joined a company, it was a culture was there to try and build as much as possible. And what I found, companies that generally move really quickly when it comes to making transformations, it's all about trying to be nimble and agile as quickly as possible. And the best way to do that is less about trying to build something and more about buy. So the question is, what are different technologies that you can kind of buy and bring in to try and help support that transformation. And so I was fortunate, that internally, we didn't really have the resources to do this, but we were also honest enough to know that, in order to do this, that I would require support and budget, which I was given from my exec team to actually go and get them some of these platforms. So an example being, one thing was just to try and migrate a lot of our data into like Amazon Web Service, that try to move a lot of, getting bind storage on that was one piece. The other part of that, when it comes, because a lot of our use case was around marketing challenges around acquiring customers. And so we were trying to grow on mobile. And so another one is around mobile measurement partner. And so, we worked with a partner called AppsFlyer, and AppsFlyer really helps you to really understand the attribution in terms of how you're spending your money across different channels, and having and really trying to be able to figure out the main metrics around what's the efficiency on that spend, how much are you acquiring customers, and what's your return on ad spend. The other part of that was really trying to personalize the whole onboarding user journey for these users that were coming into our product, and really being able to run A/B tests at scale to really figure out really quickly, like if Susie's coming in from Europe, what's the best experience for her is going to be different from Susie coming in from the United States. And so in order to do that, we worked with this partner called Lean Plum, which was a customer CRM platform. But the big part was really connecting AppsFlyer, Lean Plum, and all of our data that lived kind of in the cloud at Amazon, and it required building APIs and pipes, so the data was able to circulate really quickly in real time, and putting the foundation. Once we put the foundation in, the other part that I would say that's really important for any transformation is to really set goals at the offset, so that everybody knows how you're going to measure success, but also be super transparent about sharing successes and how things are going. And so, once we implemented that, we fundamentally picked a use case that I knew would have immediate value to the business, which was really, how can we get how can we grow the business as quickly as possible? And that really depended on how can we spend our marketing budget as efficiently as possible. And so using that use case and really being transparent about the idea was to really scale our budget from 50,000 to over $1 million as quickly as possible, and to try and get that return on investment where we would try to recoup whatever we're spending as quickly as possible. So as an example, when we were doing this manually, it used to take us about 6 to 8 months. So if we spent like $100,000, it would take us about 6 to 8 months to get that money back from any customers that came in. And once we started doing all of the AI and just getting so much better, as we started getting more and more data, we were able to train. And so the component of AI that we really ended up using, it was called machine learning, where we were able to try and create a lot of correlations around behaviors and actions that really led to our highest value customers and the types of users we wanted to target. And once we started doing that, what we found in a matter of, I think it was like 6 to 8 weeks, we started getting some really positive results. But over 3 months in, we started decreasing our time to recoup our investment back. And eventually we had it where when we started spending millions of dollars a month, we'll be able to get most of that money back within like 30 days, which was amazing. So that we ended up sort of creating our own virtuous cycle of investing this money, and the customers would pay us that money back. So we would just take that money and put it back into growth. And so we created this cycle where we didn't have to go out and raise money. And that's what really led us from being really nowhere to becoming like the second highest grossing social gaming app in the world.
Which is brilliant, and I mean, very impressive. And what I'm hearing quite a few things. So I'd just like to unpack a couple of them. So I'm hearing also that you're working in interconnected ecosystems, and that you're managing almost as the norm the complexity and the risk that's involved in those virtuous cycles. So I think that's really interesting from a leadership perspective as to how that enables the growth in your organization, whether it's a startup or a larger organization. I think translating it into larger organizations is interesting, but maybe a little bit more difficult in terms of the organizational design and how agile that is. But I think also, if I come back to understanding data, so machine learning only learns what you put in. So the quality of data as you put in, I think, is very interesting in terms of leaders understanding data. So what's in their data and what it will enable for them in terms of, let's say, new leadership skills. So an understanding of business processes, but also technical acumen. And of course, on top of that, what keeps us human. I mean, you mentioned Amazon, and it reminds me of you say in your book around Jeff Bezos saying, business success is about looking at the things that won't change, not those that will, which brings me back to people. Not that people won't change, but we know that humans are wired in a certain way, and that change takes quite a long time, even though we adapt well, as we saw with COVID and other such experiences. But it brings me to, how can I take the learnings you've just given to me and help them to scale things in a larger, more traditional organization? What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I think the point around Jeff Bezos that you brought up is a really good one, because and I think this applies to any big organization. For the most part, when people talk about AI, they're always trying to think of what's the most elaborate project that we could do with AI, and
the funky stuff.
Sure, there's plenty of complexity things that AI can solve. An example being, when we had the pandemic around trying to accelerate the testing and the approvals around vaccinations. A big part of that only happened because of AI, because it was able to really computate a lot of all of that data that was coming in to really figure out what's the right formula to really create the quickest vaccination, right? For the speed to market. But that's kind of an edge case of AI, because most people aren't trying to save the world from health crisis. And so what I would highly recommend is is look at use cases that no matter what you're doing today, which is a problem, is also going to be a problem in 5-10 years, because then people can really relate to that problem. And so when it comes to business, you know, the one thing is always going to be around growth, because companies are always going to look to grow, whether you have an economic slowdown or you have an economic boom. Companies are always under the challenge on how do you continue to acquire customers, how you continue to retain customers, how do you continue to like monetize and be able to drive predictable revenue growth. And so, you know, that I would try to focus AI projects around that, and that's what I ended up doing, which was how I was able to get a lot of consensus internally, because everybody was able to relate to that challenge. And so in a big company, I would start off with projects where it's going to be more of a unifier than a divider internally. Because if you go with certain pet projects, it becomes pretty clear that you're not going to get general consensus around it. So look at businesses and ultimately, you know, focus on two areas, like how you're either going to make more money or how you're going to save money. So it's either about growth or efficiency. And if you can tie back a project to that, for the most part, every company, especially big companies, they always have these different goals for different teams that ultimately ladder up into the bigger goal that company's trying to strive to. And so if you can sort of come up with AI projects that ultimately support the bigger strategic goal of the business, that's a great way to get internal consensus. And then the second part of that is really to do a risk audit assessment in terms of what are the resources it will take. And generally what I find is as humans, we always try to underestimate how much something could cost and overestimate how much time it could potentially take. And so, you know, I feel that at least for me, you know, what worked was to really come up with different scenarios ahead of time. So create scenario plannings around, hey, these are potential risks and what can the company can do to try and mitigate it as much as possible. Ultimately, there's risk in anything. There's risk even when you get in your car and you're driving down the road. So you don't know. but all you can do is try to control the inputs of what you can control. So, you know, for me, the way I always thought about AI was, you know, there's levers or inputs that you can control, which is ultimately for us, it's really about getting our data into one unified place, trying to get the data to be as clean as possible, and trying to make sure that we had a data acquisition strategy so that we were able to predictably get that data day in, day out. And then once we got the data, the idea was, what's the technology landscape or the platforms that we would need to really be able to integrate to that data to get to the outcome that we were looking for. The outcome for us was really to grow the business, but you could have different outcomes. As long as if you get so obsessed on the outcomes, then you're going to really miss the key steps, which is really the inputs and the technology to get to the outcomes. But I feel, focusing on really good use cases that everybody can get behind, really come up with scenario planning on terms of the potential risks, and the third thing that I did, that for big companies that I think is really is to work through all the different layers of management. So don't just focus on at the top, like trying to get the executives behind us. Talk to the middle management. Talk to people, the rank and file, the people that that are at the bottom, in terms of the ones that are going to be kind of the hands and feet in terms of doing the execution and putting the strategy into practice. And the key there is really just doing I use the word town hall meetings, but the question is really just doing a lot of meetings where everybody feels like they're being heard, because I think it's important. If everybody feels that they're heard and the question is being validated, and anybody brings up really good points, acknowledge that and put that into kind of the risk assessments. That really gets people excited, because people ultimately want to know that they're part of the process and they're not just being dictated to do something.
Yeah, and the sort of what's in it for me, because I often feel like, when data first came, well, data analytics, data science, data engineering, and the change in business models and use of data, we always had to demystify data or demystify digital, if you like. And I feel like we have to demystify AI. Machine learning, deep learning, it's just the start of a larger sort of codependent relationship, isn't it, between humans and technology. But often in organizations, and I'm coming back to my skills question, people are afraid that AI and automation means I'm going to lose my job. So it's interesting to have that discussion upfront around those fears and demystify, like you said, exactly what AI is bringing and to which projects and what that means, not only for me and my job, but also for our ways of working. Because you talk about, you need the winning team mindset. And I really like that winning together mindset, because that's exactly what we do need to collaborate on a human level, but also to collaborate within an ecosystem. Can you tell us a little bit more around the winning together mindset and what it brings to the partnership of technology, AI in this case, and human collaboration?
Yeah, and I think the key point there is that ultimately, everybody's thinking about what's in it for me, right? And that makes a lot of sense, because there's a lot of fear, and I think a lot of this is really driven by just the media and the different stories that are out there. You never really hear that much about the positive parts of what AI is doing to impact businesses and communities and people's lives. It's mostly a lot because negative stories sell, right? So there's a lot of stories around,
because our brains are wired.
All of these jobs are getting automated. All these people are going to be out of jobs, and so on and so forth. And so that was clearly a fear and challenge for me internally that I went through when I tried to do this at IMVU. But it's also something that I heard because as part of the book, I did a lot of research and I spoke to other companies that kind of went through similar journeys. And the best way to address that is as I say, address the elephant in the room. And so bring it up, but don't bring it up in the context of what it is. Bring it up in the context of this could be
opportunities,
an opportunity to really up level and upskill different roles in the organization, and that's where you're talking less about the problem and more about the solution in terms of how it's actually going to make someone's job more efficient. Because when I had these conversations, and I'm a lot of people at the end of the day don't like creating spreadsheets and creating all these reports. It may look like they're having fun, but they're not really having a lot of fun. People don't like doing all this menial tasks around, especially around looking at data, because it can and that's and so in terms of the human machine relationship, it's the future of is the first thing to remember is that artificial intelligence is really built by human intelligence. It's the humans that really are in control. That's the first thing to remind everyone, that
it's the starting point, isn't it?
It's a starting point. And the great thing is that we actually get to define and control how we want to leverage AI in our different organizations or in our lives. And then the other part of that is, by using AI, how does it actually make your job better or easier? And sure, it's going to bring a lot of efficiencies around menial tasks and processes that you don't have to do. And then the question becomes like, okay, then I'm going to save all of this time. So what's going to happen to me? Well, what's going to happen is you have to paint the picture, because ultimately, there's opportunities to really up-level people, to really, instead of just thinking about being executors, but becoming more strategic around, because a lot of people that work in companies have great institutional knowledge and ideas. The question is, how can you validate those ideas as quickly as possible? And so for us, when we were thinking about implementing AI, it was all around creating this whole growth mindset, which was all around test, learn, and iterate as
Yeah.
quickly as possible. And so, everyone on my team and in the company, everybody has an idea, hey, we should be doing this or we should be doing that. But generally what happened is that a lot of ideas get stifled because companies don't have the resources to try everything. But with AI, especially in a business context, you can run all these different experiments around all these different hypotheses. So we kind of gamified the whole idea around bringing AI in, which was everybody every month we would reach out to the company and have everyone sort of put out ideas about, hey, we want to try these experiments that could help grow the business. Before, it used to be more like a committee of a few executives sort of trying to figure out, hey, we'll do this and that. That's a lot of pressure, because the truth is, having been an executive myself, we don't really know all the answers either. It's,
that's the first admission, though, isn't it, Lomit? We don't know
that's
all
the
the
first
answers.
admission, is to know that you don't know the answers. And the second admission is, how do you create a process to figure out the answer as quickly as possible? And that's what we ended up sort of bringing the mindset around. This AI is actually going to enable us to have a lot of fun internally, because now we have a team of people that really have all these ideas. Let's let the machine be able to run these experiments. And so, just to give you an example, we used to run experiments, probably about 50 to 60 experiments a month, in terms of like different channels we want to test, different creatives we want to test, different audiences we want to target, and different experiences. But with AI, we're able to increase that to like tens or thousands of experiments a month. Because with AI, you can do all these different permutations. For example, just running an experiment like trying to target a certain type of user in a certain country with a certain creative. But imagine doing that across the world, because our business is IMV was worldwide. But instead of just limiting it to like the US, you could do that across the world, across 50 countries, 1 month, and be able to figure out like what works in the US is completely different to what's going to work in the UK, or what's going to work in like Singapore. And so all of that is only possible with the benefits of having AI, and the benefits of automating a lot of the tasks and processes. And so what it came down to for us was continuing to repeat that message to people around in terms of how it would make their jobs better, but also having the ability to invest into training our employees to really be able to understand how to work well with machines, because ultimately it's a relationship where if humans work well with a machine, and a machine is ultimately a tool that will help to up level the role that the human is doing. And so it really came down to just educating our users, showing the vision, but more importantly, doing it in stages, so that at the end of the day, we didn't really end up needing to let people go, because we just created more work. But we, instead of creating more busy work, we created more high impactful work where people were involved, and the leverage on the work they were doing was having a much bigger impact on driving revenue growth for us.
And that's the growth mindset piece, though, isn't it? So equipping also people with the skills, and therefore the muscles to build on critical thinking, on empathy, on that type of decision making, getting past the data that machines don't have yet. Which brings me to my other point of diverse decision making. You talk about it in your book around the algorithms will clearly only recognize what you give them to recognize. So how do you counter, if I come back to your example of global populations and global users, how do you make sure that you have the necessary data fed into AI and machine learning for it to be to recognize your user and customer base?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that really starts from how you structure the data in the first place. So it's just clearly making sure, like, where you're gathering the data is being clearly structured so that the machine knows that this user is coming from, for example, the United States. This user is coming from the United Kingdom. This user is coming from like India, and this user is coming from Brazil. And so for us, and a lot of companies have this. Generally, when you sign up for a product or service, whether it's free or paid, you end up creating an account, whether you know it or not. And with each account, there's a unique identifying number that is associated. And so for us, we call it a customer ID. And so every ID was stamped to a different country that a user is coming from. So based on that identifier, that's how we started building these customer profiles around each identifier. So we would know, this user was coming from, for example, Brazil. And then we would look at all of the profiles of other users that are coming from Brazil and how were they behaving, and what was resonating well for them when they were playing our game versus users coming from the US. And the machine was able to make these recognitions and correlations around building an algorithm, which ultimately, simplistically, we say we built, a sophisticated algorithm that worked for our business. But what we ended up doing is we created a series of micro algorithms that worked for each country.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think diverse decision making is also, also something in organizations with human leaders around the table, which also needs growth mindset, but is often overlooked, and that's why innovation is often stifled, because we don't have these diverse perspectives. And I think it's really important that we understand that machine learning and AI and deep learning will only learn on what the human puts in as data. So I think it's really important in terms of diversity and inclusion, and looking at what we want to recognize and which population we want to serve, that we try and take the bias out as much as possible as we code, if you like. So it's interesting to come back to future skills and the fact that, ed tech and teaching children to code. How do you counter that subject with children? Do you actually make it conscious for them, or what happens there?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I'm really, excited to work with Tinker now, because the big mission at Tinker, having sort of seen the transformation that a lot of companies are going to be going through, it all starts with people. And when you kind of envision what the future of work's going to be, you can read a number of different studies, whether it's from like Oxford University or if it's from the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the United States. But I think everybody agrees there's going to be more jobs that are going to be automated. And so ultimately, having some understanding of technology and how coding works is really important. And the best time to really teach people how to code, it's like learning any other language. The younger you are,
as young as possible,
the quicker you'll be able to pick this up. And so Tinker's mission is to, by 2033, to try and get every high school student to be exposed to at least learning how to code. And it's a big, bold mission, but it's something that really, attracted me to the company, because ultimately I know in the future of work, it's really important to really start with the education system. And Tinker is the number one coding platform, and that's really used by a lot of schools and parents to really teach their kids. And the reason why it's so successful and used by over 60 million kids is the reason why it works is because they've used a similar approach to what, coming from the gaming industry, where they use this play-based gamified experience. So it's kind of like, I think a lot of people can relate to how Lego works, right?
Yes.
Where you take these build different blocks. And so Tinker created their own block code language where it first starts off sort of showing you how to take different blocks of code and putting it together and sort of building a simple algorithm to tell a machine what to do. And from that, it sort of puts it into use cases where where kids are really unconsciously doing these simple learning simple block coding and going through these progressions, because the curriculum has over 5,000 different lessons, but it starts and it shows you all these different progressions on how to grow from an elementary school, from a 5 to 7 year old, all the way through high school to like 18. We kind of cover the gamut. But once kids get started on using Tinker, they'll be able to create block coding and be able to move and migrate all the way into more sophisticated forms of coding like Python and Java. And in the process, they'll be doing all of these gamified experience of building games, creating art projects, creating apps, because a lot of kids really like apps. And all of these things that all of us use every day on our phone, but kids are really getting to create this, and that's where the where they get more and more excited about coding, because ultimately learning to code is just like learning a second language. And I think you and I grew up in the UK, and the second language that I had to learn was French.
Yes, me too.
And so there's a reason why they wanted you to learn French, because it kind of broadens your perspective and in the way you think about things. And learning the second language as a kid is so much easier. And coding is just another language. But I feel, coding, just like, maths and science, technology and engineering, the STEM subjects, coding actually helps you to get better at all of those different subjects, because it has a logical computation way of thinking about things. Like, you're creating these rules around, if this happens, then equals this. And so bringing it back, whether you end up becoming a coder or not, it will just help you to create those critical thinking skills, help you to really understand how machines work, so that, in the future of work, not everybody is going to become the coder, but even to become, a leader in the future of work, you got to have an understanding of how technology works. And that's what coding will give you, that perspective. And then you'll have the empathy on how to communicate and how to influence change across different organizations that you work with. Because whether you're actually doing the work or you painting a picture of what you want the work to become, it are just as equally important. And so outside of just having technology skills, the other part of the future of work is really creating those soft skills of communications and personal. Those things are not going to go away, because if you have the soft skills to go with the knowledge of of technology, it doesn't matter what way, shape, or form the future of work goes, you'll definitely have a really important role to play.
Absolutely. And I think it's a shame that we haven't yet got to the education system, or not in all countries, around the language of emotions, let's put it that way, or the language of human-based interpersonal skills at an educational level, right from the word go. Because technology is great, but as you say, when you get into an environment where you need your more human-based skills, coaching skills, even if what I call basic coaching skills, even if you're not a coach, you may not ever become a coach. However, you're going to need to build meaningful relationships and be able to collaborate and scale empathy, if you like, within an organization, whether it's a startup or an SME or a large organization. So, well, I'm seeing small shifts, that the next thing will be what Tinker is doing, but for the softer skills, because like you say, it's easy to learn when we're younger, and it needs to be part of this codependent relationship that we're moving towards at quite an exponential speed. But those softer skills, you don't acquire them at an exponential speed. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'll use Tinker as an example, because we have millions of kids in our community. But one of the things that we really hear back from parents, outside of just the delight that a lot of kids get from not only just consuming technology, but actually becoming makers and creators of technology. That in itself just builds a lot of confidence in kids. But the other part of that, in order to do coding projects, there's a lot of like group projects that sort of come out of that, because we have this huge community, and generally when kids start working on projects, they, just like with anything, it's not going to work. It's not going to be perfect and easy the first time around. And what happens is a lot of them actually reach out to other kids in the community, and there's millions of kids, and it's so great to see other kids really sort of working together, where you get a lot of kids who are at different stages sort of reaching back and saying, hey, by the way, did you think about doing it this way or doing it that way? And so indirectly, what the biggest skill that kids are really learning from Tinker, outside of just the hard skills, it's really the soft skills around resilience, because you need resilience whenever you run into something that's challenging to continue to keep going. The second skill you're learning is teamwork, because you reach out to the community, and the community kind of reciprocates. And that requires communication. So you're learning problem solving, teamwork, you're learning resilience, and the delight really comes from, when we because we do a lot of research on our parents and kids, and a lot of kids that use this in school use it the same way, where kids are kind of, it's all around project-based work. So the delight really comes from whether you have things in common or not with other kids, but when you're doing coding, you always find something in common, which is around sort of working towards a common goal to try and solve a problem. And that, is priceless, I would say.
Yeah, and they're learning collaboration, and when you say resilience, they're also learning what I call creative resilience, aren't they? Because it's not like just bouncing back. It's like, oh, that didn't work, let's see what else could work, coming from a place of curiosity. And they get to use their creativity together. So that makes me very enthusiastic and hopeful for what they're going to bring into their workplaces, whatever those workplaces will look like in the future. Lomit, time is running, but I would like to ask you, would you have a final word or a call to action for our listeners who are thinking, okay, I need to do something to look at how I can use AI in my organization, big or small?
Yeah, what I would encourage, and this is what happened with me, when I was thinking about AI and trying to sort of bring this transformative change in my old company at IMVU, the first thing that really inspired me was to start reading around the subject and going to YouTube and looking at videos and really just sort of seeing, how are these things being done at other companies, and I always get fascinated just reading and watching people's interviews. And generally, when you watch interviews, when something's done, you only see part of the journey, but it's always good to sort of watch people that are getting interviewed to actually tell you about where they started. And what you'll find is there's never a perfect start for any of this transformation. It's really about, just get started for the most part, and get started, try and just take it upon yourself to really, be able to self-teach yourself by going out and finding resources, doing classes and courses. And there's a lot of great free content that's out there. So you don't necessarily need to, be able to, invest 9 months of your life going through some formal education. It really just comes down to, self-educate and be a lifelong learner. That's what I've been. I've always been, curiosity has always been something that's driven me from a young age, and always, and out of curiosity comes the ability to want to be able to find answers to the different questions you keep asking yourself, and so that leads to becoming a lifelong learner. And I'll encourage anyone, if you go check out my book, Lean AI, it maps out the entire journey, and it's pretty much a roadmap of the same sort of thing anybody else is going to go through if they want to implement digital transformation, of whether it's artificial intelligence or any other transformation, because it all maps out to a similar journey, and what I went through, it maps out to hundreds of interviews that I did previously on my research, and everyone had a similar journey as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a blueprint and a roadmap. And I think the curiosity comes through in your writing. So, you make us curious about what's coming next. And it's simple, even for lay people out. So I'm not an expert in AI. I understand a lot more about it than I did before I read your book. So I would invite our listeners to get curious and also to read your book on Lean AI, which is not just about AI. It's also about teamwork and the future of work and humans adapting to a digital world. Lomit, thank you very much. Thank you for coming and sharing your thoughts, your insight, your research. Where can people find out more about you and what you do?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Susie. It was
been a pleasure.
Yeah. The best way to find out about me, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So, another way to stay on top of things around AI and digital transformation, I always share a lot of content on LinkedIn. So definitely reach out and you can connect with me or follow me on LinkedIn. It's pretty much my name, Lomit Patel. You'll find me. I also have a website where I put a lot of blog content that I write about, and my blog is pretty much my name. It's Lomit Patel, LOMIT.PATEL.com. So you can find me at both those places. But if anybody has any questions, if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'll be happy to get back to you and share or at least try to answer the question to the best of my ability.
Okay, excellent. So I would encourage you to reach out to Lomit if you've got any questions, and I will put the blog he just mentioned in the show notes so that you can click straight on it. Okay, great. Thank you once again, Lomit. It's a great conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Susie.